Thank you very much. I was just seeing if the mood-setting music stops when I speak, and it does, so everything's good in the world. So good morning. It's great to be here with you again. So enjoyed last night the opportunity, along with President Paxson and Dean Zia, to share some initial thoughts with all of you parent and families. Again, I'm Eric Estes, and I have the honor of serving as Vice President for Campus Life here at Brown. And I am particularly excited this morning to welcome you to our second annual Parent and Family Orientation. A number of years ago, there were a group of us who felt like we needed to do more to engage with parent and families and are really excited about what we've been able to do over the last couple of years. I hope some of you have been able to join webinars in advance of these last couple of days over the spring and summer. I do want to thank my colleague, Mikkel, over here in the corner. Many of you have already met her. She took over leadership of our new Parent and Family Engagement Office a couple of years ago and has just been doing a terrific job. So wanted to recognize her at the outset. Again, like I said last evening, you had an opportunity to hear from us. I personally spoke a lot about what I love about the Brown student community. And especially about the support that Brown provides to students. Today, you're going to get to hear from a panel of my colleagues who are doing that work every day with your students, and they are just terrific. So they're going to talk more about the resources that I gestured to. Again, like I said last night, I really do think I have the best job at Brown. I get to work with hundreds of colleagues in the Division of Campus Life, who are engaged in the educational, developmental, and supportive work that is so important to the student experience here as they grow as individuals and in community with each other. I'm grateful that you're going to get to hear from them, and I know you'll agree that they are just fantastic. We see you all as key partners as we work towards your students' success. I mentioned before, we really have emphasized this in the last couple of years through parent and family engagement. You know them best. You may remember last night that I encouraged you to create a communication plan with them, encourage your student to ask for help when they need it, to engage in some intentional self-care. We recognize that your relationship with them is an important partnership for us in our desire for them to thrive here at Brown. So again, we're going to invite you today to learn more about the resources that are here. We can talk about some resources that aren't in the tent, but certainly this is a beginning of a journey to learn more about how we support your student at Brown. And I would also like to talk a little bit more about how we think about that partnership with parents. And it really is, for us, grounded in the understanding that your student has a special opportunity to develop a wide range of life skills during their time here so that they can, both while they're here and then when they go out into the world after Brown, best advocate for themselves and make decisions for themselves. It's why we often insist on speaking and working directly with your student during their time here at Brown. It's not that we won't partner with you, but we like to have that direct contact. And so please don't be surprised if an office urges for that kind of interactive relationship. We think it's important that we allow students to grow and develop and become independent. It's part of what really is going to be their transformative experience here over the next 4 years. And it's our way of being supportive of you and of them. So again, thank you again for being here. The weather, if you were here last night, it was a little hot under this tent. Thank you all for bringing some amazing weather this morning. It is fantastic. You all should take full credit for the weather. And again, I want to thank you for being here. I want to welcome you to Brown. And I want to introduce a colleague of mine now who is just terrific. Her impact on Brown has been truly amazing and transformative in all of the best ways. Corin Bakkegaard is our Dean of Students. She works very closely with a number of the departments in the Division of Campus Life that are charged with building community, building belonging, building support and well-being. and you'll learn, just as we all have during our time with her, that she is just truly terrific. So I look forward to her and the panel being able to talk with you all today and to answer your questions. So if you've had a question since you've gotten here or one occurs to you during the course of the program, don't be shy. Feel free to jump forward and ask, and we'd be happy to share. So again, I'll turn it over to Dean Backegard.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice President Estes, for that very kind introduction. Parents, grandparents, families, guardians, and really supporters of our new students, we welcome you and your students to Brown and hope that you've had smooth travels and a successful transition so far. As Vice President Estes mentioned, my name is Corin Backegard. I'm Associate Vice President for Campus Life and Dean of Students. I use the she/her pronoun series. The goal of our session today is to have an opportunity to introduce you to some of the staff and the resources in the offices that are designed to promote your students' well-being during their time at Brown. I think in our program description, we may say during the first year, but I really want to underscore that all of these resources and all of our support is present for students across their entire Brown career. So on stage this morning, we have staff from several offices, 4 of our offices in the Division of Campus Life, but we really represent just a few of the many, many offices and colleagues who are dedicated to your students' success and well-being. I know we have another panel this afternoon at 3 o'clock that has some of our other colleagues who will be present. So those joining me here on stage this morning will give a brief introduction first, an overview of some of the services and programs that their offices provide or oversee. But we really want to be sure that we spend the majority of our time answering questions. I'll begin with some that I know are frequently asked questions over the summer, and then I'll be watching the questions that come in through the QR codes that are positioned around the tent. But joining me here on stage, and I will start from my side and go down the table. First, Dean Katie Boyne, who's Senior Associate Dean and Director of Student Support Services. Next is Dean Brenda Ice, Senior Associate Dean and Director of Residential Life. And Dr. Adam Pallant, who's the Clinical Director of Health Services. We also have space for and hope that we'll be joined by our colleague, Dr. Bryant Ford, who is the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services. So, as I mentioned, I'd like to ask each of our panelists to quickly begin with that overview, and if you don't mind, Dean Boyne kicking us off.
Absolutely. Welcome and good morning. I have the luxury of being able to speak first, and that allows me to say, you made it. And we know in our collective years of experience of welcoming parents who have sat in these chairs before you, that we know that it's been 100% smooth sailing, and there's been no tension at all between you and your students, correct? So good for you. I am the Director of Student Support Services, and SSS, as it's known here on campus, works with students who are actually in crisis or distress, students who may be facing a complicated or complex set of circumstances that may interrupt their ability to persist and thrive, either in our academic settings or in our social residential settings, that we take a holistic view. We know that your children are brilliant. They wouldn't be here otherwise. But that doesn't mean that they might not face, hi, Dr. Ford. That doesn't mean that they won't face adverse events, right? Or that they might make mistakes. And Student Support Services is a central office to weave a safety net for your students and work together with campus partners to collaborate, to intervene, and to offer resources to students who may be facing difficulty. So we have an open door policy. We work with students who want to consult or talk with us about, I know I need resources, I know I need something, but I'm not sure where to go or where to start. And something else that we talk a lot about with students is that we don't want to presume that just because they're brilliant, they know exactly where to go and what they need. They might not. and that's okay. And they can come to our office, and we'll help them find those resources, and we'll help them do it so that they're not doing it alone. I'll talk more about the ways in which we interact with students and how that looks later on throughout the panel and answering questions, but that is the overview for now. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Ford, would you mind providing just a quick overview of some of the services and programs provided by CAPS?
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Bryant Ford. I am the Director of the Counseling and Psychological Services here at Brown University, and I've been here for about 1.5 years, and I use he, him pronouns. CAPS is our main branch for mental health services on campus. However, I'm a firm believer that everybody at Brown owns mental health, so that includes all of my colleagues on this panel. We currently have about 14 clinicians on our staff, trained both at the master's and doctoral level, and we also have about 2 FTEs in terms of psychiatry. What we provide is individual psychotherapy for students who are interested. We do not have short session limits. We basically tell students that we work with them on goal-directed issues, and once they've been able to achieve those goal-directed issues, we will terminate therapy, or we'll help them get connected to a provider in the community. In addition, we also offer group therapy, but not many students like group therapy for some reason or another. Somehow being in a space with people who share very similar concerns as you can be a little threatening. But we still continue to offer group options, and hopefully students will begin to use those. We also provide urgent care services. So anytime that a student or your student is in crisis, they can access a clinician on call. They can use the number on the back of their ID cards and follow the prompts that will get them in contact with a clinician who will talk with them, triage the situation, and then we will be made aware of that the following morning. And then finally, we also offer psychiatry. Psychiatry services are a specialty clinic. So in order to be seen by a psychiatrist, you have to be referred, and you also have to be in treatment with a provider, mental health provider. Clinicians can refer people to a psychiatrist using a form on our website, which will allow the clinicians to understand exactly what's going on, and then also make a determination about whether or not this can be seen with a psychiatrist, or might they be able to be seen by a provider in our health service, which Adam will talk about a little bit later. The only other thing that I'd like to add is that we also offer a number of workshops for students. One in particular is the Anxiety Toolbox Workshop. As you can imagine, coming to school is full of transitions. Students might be experiencing anxiety in ways that they haven't experienced before. And so we're trying to teach them some skills that will allow them to be able to manage the anxiety and also understand that anxiety can be a very natural and normal part of the academic process when you're a first-year student or a transfer student. So that's just a brief overview of our services. Happy to talk more about that as we continue on.
And to you, Dean Ice.
Hello, everyone. Brenda Ice, Senior Associate Dean, Senior Director of Residential Life. Describe what I do. We did it yesterday. We moved all you in. So thank you. I wish it were that easy. Yesterday was just a small portion of what we do in residential life. I have the distinct pleasure of having a wonderful team of directors who manage 4 distinct units in residential life. The first is residential education, and that is kind of our programmatic and community building and all of the things that are happening inside the residential hall. They are here obviously at Brown for their academic experience, but most of their time is spent outside of the classroom, and that is where our director and the staff that support our residential education unit really step up. It is the community coordinators that you met yesterday. It's our area coordinators. It is our assistant and directors and the programs that are happening in the space to really make them feel like they belong and can find community outside of their roommate, outside of that particular suite or area that they're living in. The goal at the end of the year is really to have made a touch point with someone other than your roommate. It seems simple. You just need to know one other person. But the goal is after you know that one, they already know one, and now your network has started to build. So that is the work that's happening out of residential education. We have another subunit of residential education that has a specialized housing population. So our unit oversees Greek, letter organizations, program houses, which are student-driven, largely based in an identity or same or similar interest, and then theme communities, which are sponsored programs with campus partners around the campus, where the focus is really on something that we find critical to either a commitment to the institution, or we're seeing a growing interest in our student population that want this type of community setting. And so that director and his team oversee those specialized communities. It also includes the other special interest housing that we offer in substance-free, in our quiet housing, or in single-sex housing that we provide at all stages, not just in the first-year community. We then have our director of residential operations, and she was the brains behind yesterday's operations. And so that is one small portion of hers, along with all of the housing assignments. So raise your hand if your students love their roommate. Yay! That was her. Raise your hand if they don't. That's still her. But I hope that the experience that they have now in the placement translates into our housing selection, where at the start of the spring, they'll have the ability to actually pick where they would like to live next year and the future years that they are living with us. And then our last unit is our new student programs and community initiatives. And that is being led by Mary Jordan, who just joined us about a week and a half ago and is leading our orientation program that our students are currently in today. And that is intentionally designed not to call her the director of orientation, because we believe orientation is more than 5 days. And so what we're actually creating is an experience for them. And more importantly, we're doing it each year. And so you are a new student every year that you come to us. It just means you're learning something a little bit different, or we're reintroducing you to resources that you didn't think you needed in your first year, but now find far more critical in your second, third, and even in your fourth year. One of the other elements of her position will be managing what we are broadly calling community initiatives, and that's thinking about the partnerships that we need to expand within residential life with our campus partners, but more importantly with the city of Providence. And so we're embarking on a new community initiative, a good neighbor program called The Block, which is Brunonians living off campus. Seniors are not required to live on campus, but we still think it's important to have that transitional and educational workshop available to them to prepare them for independent living. And so that also falls under the umbrella of residential life. Pretty big portfolio, but I'm excited. We have a wonderful team in place that supports the students from the first day arrive to the last day they leave and graduate. And one final lovely touch point that touches all of these colleagues that are here is that our office manages the university's after hours and crisis response, so the AOC, or Administrator on Call program. All of our area coordinators who are live-on full-time master's level professionals serve as the first point of contact when a student feels they need support after the business hour. And we have a team of those practitioners who pick up the phone and help triage those conversations to direct them to resources the next business day, or if it is truly an immediate crisis, to be able to activate the different protocols and services that we have to support students in crisis.
Thank you. Dr. Pallant, you're next.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Pallant. I'm a physician of a certain age, and I'm going to throw at you that I'm the clinical director of the health services unit here on campus for the last 6 years, and for the 19 years before that was a residency director in the medical school. So I've been part of the Brown family for more than 25 years. And so that gives me permission to say that I've seen thousands and thousands of students come through and Van Winkle or whatever they do this coming week. They're gonna go through some gate and that makes them official. They're gonna be okay. They're gonna be okay. We don't have a 10% they stop breathing in the first 24 hours rate. They're gonna be okay. And I just sort of wanna set you up for the understanding that every one of your children is gonna cry at some point in the next 4 years, and every one of your children is gonna do something dumb. And I ask you to be prepared to respond, and you can practice it here quietly under your breath. You can do it at home. You can respond with, "We still love you and this will pass." Get some tissues. And really? You get to say, really? And then say, we still love you, get some tissues. They're gonna make it. Now, what I do wanna share with you is how proud I am of the health services that we run here. It is an exceptionally robust primary care medical home with providers that truly have great depth in the specialty area of adolescent and young adult healthcare. We don't do surgery on campus. You know, we're not ablating brain tumors, but God forbid somebody needs that, we will direct each and any student to the care that they may need, and we'll follow up to make sure that all the loops are closed. What I simply want to say is the door is open to anything. And I want the message to trickle through all of you and ultimately all your students is you don't have to have a surgical phenomenon to walk into that clinic or make an appointment by phone to make it a worthwhile visit. If you are not feeling well, talk to us. The door is open. We may not hit it out of the park every time, but each one of us is truly dedicated. The people that I've hired on care. They care. They're smart and they care. And our goal is to do whatever we can to allow you to get back to feeling to your best self. And then just one little editorial comment. Over the decades I've been here, please understand that different physicians, clinicians can practice in different ways. We are part of the medical school larger system here. We do try to do the most up-to-date evidence-based practice that makes the most sense. And that might be somewhat different than what you've observed with your family practitioner, pediatrician, or equivalent. You are welcome to ask why it's different, but please bear with us in that even though it's different, it doesn't mean that it's not done thoughtfully. And with that, I'll say we're here to keep your kids feeling their best to the best of our capacity.
So, Dr. Palin, I wonder if I can keep it with you for just a moment, because some of the questions that have come in and ones that we frequently get over the summer pertain to health services. So if you don't mind if we stay with you for a moment. Could you talk a little bit about how students are made aware of health services, and also how do students either have a walk-in or make an appointment, what that is like for students to engage in services?
Sure. I'm hoping they're made aware essentially every which way, ranging from the fact that each of you has likely contributed a lot of money and want to know what you got for your money, and one of that is free health on campus. It comes through a variety of interfaces that we have like this with the students during orientation. We also have a wing called Be Well, which is an organization that does community health and is out in the dorms doing a lot of health education and health outreach. But in truth, I think it would be highly unlikely that with all of the touch points that each student has with faculty, area coordinators, peers, seniors, they know us. We've been there for them. The vast majority of students at some point or another touch bases with us. We're not a mysterious entity, and I hope and assume that people will be readily directed to us. This isn't everyone's favorite. If somebody walks in, we'll attend to them, but our strong preference is that individuals call to make an appointment. Our phone number is on the back of every single student's ID card. We did have a walk-in policy for a moment and spread COVID around the campus widely as everybody was sitting waiting for their appointments, because when we were busy, and we couldn't see all 30 people at once. We really don't want to make things inconvenient for students and do understand that people have in-between class wishes. But what we don't want is a whole bunch of people walking in at once with 9 providers, 30 people waiting, and everybody sitting in that tight waiting room making each other sick. So we do ask that whenever humanly possible, call, make an appointment, and that way we don't have any congestion and cross-contamination.
Thank you. Dr. Ford, I'm going to turn to you next, if you don't mind. One of the questions that we frequently get over the summer is about for families, how to determine when to be concerned about your students' mental health And if I'm going to do a twofer, because then there's also a question that was been submitted about how easy is it to see someone at CAPS? What's the situation between identifying a desire to come in to see a therapist at CAPS and what that process is like? So do you mind combining those two together?
Not at all.
Thank you.
So I mentioned earlier that, transitions can be really difficult. So it's not uncommon for students to experience some stress or anxiety. You might see some changes in the ways in which their moods are. So maybe they were typically okay, but then you're seeing some expansiveness in their moods, or you might find a little bit of depression. You might find some changes in the way in which they're thinking about things. They may have been very confident, and now they're saying, I don't think I belong, or I think maybe Brown made a mistake in admitting me. I see some people laughing, okay. And then we also see some changes in their behavior. They may become a little withdrawn, or they might even isolate in their rooms. And again, not one of these might be concerning, but what we look for is a constellation of some of these symptoms. The other piece about this that is so great is you know your children, right? So you're talking to them frequently, and you get to see when there are some ebbs and flows to their symptoms or their behaviors. And so I think if you're starting to see this chronically, then maybe that's a sign that something else is going on, and it may be really important to have a conversation with them. What I often hear a lot of times is that parents want to reassure their kids because they want to get them back to baseline very quickly. But what I often hear on my end is that whenever someone offers reassurance, it feels like you don't see them or hear them. And I think what could be really helpful is to just listen to them and then ask them how you might be helpful. And then I think what also can be helpful is if you could familiarize yourself with the resources so that you can share them with them when they're ready for it. And then it's not uncommon, I think, to call someone like from Katie's office or call someone from Brenda's office to be able to let them know that you're noticing that there's some changes with your student, and that is it possible that someone might just be aware of this? Because when people talk to us, unfortunately, we can't have bi-directional conversations. We're happy to take information in and use it when a student comes to us, but we can't necessarily reach back out to the parent to say, yes, we've seen your student and this is what's going on. But confidentiality kind of limits us from being able to do that. So I think those are some of the things to pay attention to. But if you're ever stuck, you can always call our office and consult with a clinician. And then I think your second question was about appointments and how they can get in. So like what Dr. Pallant mentioned, we really prefer students to call. I think students like to email, can they get an appointment? The challenge with that is with an email, if it comes at a time that we're not open, it may not get answered in the time that's really timely. Or from an email message, we can't determine someone's distress level. And we don't want to set them up with an appointment where it's not maybe the best appointment that they need. It could be that they need an urgent appointment and they're feeling really distressed, but we can't discern that from an email. So we prefer that they call so that we can hear what's going on in their voices. And possibly if they even come, we can have a conversation with them to really better match them with the right appointment. Once a student decides that they'd like to make an appointment, we offer a first encounter, and that can be made, or I should say they should be able to get an appointment within 3 to 5 days. And then from that appointment, they meet with a clinician to do a treatment plan to figure out what might be the best disposition. Because many times, some students will come in thinking that they need therapy, but they may not. They might need to talk to someone from Katie's office, or they may need to speak to someone else from the dean of the college area. So we just want to make sure that when we're meeting with them, we're collaborating with them on what the treatment plan would be.
Thank you. Dr. Pallant, I'm going to come back to you again. And just as with Dr. Ford, I'm going to give you two at once. One that is one of your least favorite questions, and one that I think is pretty easy and straightforward. So one of the questions, the first one I'm going to give you is about health insurance and the intersection between either SHIP and students seeking health care at health services, or if students have waived the student health insurance and have independent insurance.
Sure. Let me take the first swipe at that. And for those of you who may be trying to understand how American health insurance works, give it up. Just give it up. It's just nobody knows. It's just. Let me start with a baseline. The work that Dr. Ford and I do on campus is free to all enrolled students, not to your parents, just to them. And we're employed by Brown. We don't bill insurances. We don't care about your insurance. We don't take co-pays. We don't have limits on visits.
So I was gonna say, speak for yourself.
You take co-pays?
No, limits. You said limits on sessions.
Okay, all right. I'll speak for
Just
myself.
want to be clear.
I'll speak for myself. And if somebody is coming to my office every day, I will call them on it. But where things get a bit more complex is in following common themes: pharmacy, lab, x-ray, specialty services. We do have a pharmacy on campus right in our building. It's full service, and it will work like any other pharmacy on the planet. For better or for worse, the pharmacy system in the United States has figured out what your insurance covers and what it doesn't, and they can run that through a computer. The lab systems do not work that way. They don't have a national system. You see what I'm talking about? And between you and your student, we would need to clarify which lab is in your network so that if we need to get lab work, that they go to the one that doesn't lead you to hidden billing, and we will work on your student with that. And I can give you some tips about that. If your student has their health insurance through Brown University, you'll commonly hear that with the acronym named SHIP, the Student Health Insurance Plan. Everything that we do within our building is covered. We have SHIP associated. And for a little bit of clarity, the SHIP health insurance is actually United Healthcare. It's a student version of United Healthcare, but if your student has the Brown Health Insurance, that works anywhere in the United States and it's a United Healthcare plan. For students who may need specialty care on service, you wonder why your insurance and health rates are so high, we do have 2 people who work inside my unit full-time that we ask to assist us in making sure that people get the appropriate referrals, that they call their office, that they spend the 20 minutes on the back line with the specialty office secretary to clarify that your student actually did play piano in the 3rd grade when they said they practiced, have the right social security number, that their insurance is accepted with an appropriate copay at that office. 2 full-time people who only do that. American healthcare is so complicated, but we will work with your student. So your student's insurance kicks in for anything that's not in the primary care health realm on campus: medicines, labs, specialty referrals, off-campus therapy, physical therapy. All of those will kick your student insurance into play. Visiting with the primary care group on site is free. Students who have the Brown-based SHIP insurance, the lab on campus, the x-ray on campus is free.
Thank you. I think the other question embedded here was around transferring medications. And I think, Dr. Ford, there's also a medication question for you. So
transfer medications, I would say there are different options. Your very best option is simply to ask your student to speak with our pharmacists. Our pharmacists are brilliant. We work with students from every state in the union. There's 10,000 students here, roughly 200 come from Rhode Island. They know what they're doing, and they are very savvy in explaining how to transfer your prescription over to the pharmacy here during the semester and how to transfer it back home when you're going to California for the winter break or for summer.
Thank you. I think the next question actually may apply to, it's a little bit specific to a mental health medication, but I think this may, Dr. Palin, apply generally for other medications. If a student comes with a pre-diagnosed mental health or executive functioning issue, but they're stable on that medication, is the student able to transition the prescription here for refills, or do they need to go through an evaluation again to receive that medication?
It's a broad question. I think that the underpinning of that is in the realm of issues like mild to moderate anxiety, depression, and ADHD. What we simply ask for is some documentation that a student is on a medication that has been under the guidance of a clinician and that the medication is working. And then yes, we're not going to make someone to go through a brand new neuropsych evaluation from soup to nuts right from the very beginning. The flip side is that it's a little hairy if somebody says, I've got this. Can you give me some Klonopin? I need a little bit of Adderall. What's it called? Lexapri, one of those, just, we don't need to have people go through a formal reevaluation. We may ask that if something doesn't pass the sniff test or isn't working. But if you have documentation that this is a person with the following diagnosis, here's the treatment, it works, we'll pick it up from there.
Yeah, I would agree. I do think controlled substances, some providers feel very uncomfortable with that. And so if there is some form of documentation or at least a conversation with the provider to understand the rationale for the medication, I believe that our providers would be comfortable being able to do that.
Dean Boyne, I'm going to send this question your way. What should I do if I'm concerned about my students' well-being? How do I contact you, and what do I expect if I've reached out to the university with a concern?
So I love what Dr. Ford was saying earlier in that there are going to be behaviors, maybe even mood changes, differences that you notice in your students over particularly the next 4 months, right, in this first semester. You might see in particular a change in their mindset that we talk a lot with our student staff and other professional staff about trying to notice and ask questions. How are you feeling about things? For a person who's looking at a gas tank that's got a quarter tank left and someone says, yeah, no problem, we're going to make it, right? I'm sure there's a gas station up ahead. And person driving the same car with the same level of gas says, we're never going to make it, right? That's a difference in mindset that can illuminate sort of how a person is feeling in terms of their sense of hopefulness and positivity. And if you notice that change and you're starting to become very worried and this constellation is starting to paint a picture for you that you're uncomfortable with, do give us a call. We can't say much back to you. There are different laws that restrict Bryant and his team from talking with you. There's a different set of laws that will restrict our ability to talk back with you, but we will hear everything you have to say and consult with you and probably give you a sense of, generally speaking, what would we do in this situation for any student. So we won't talk specifically about your student, but we might be able to say, in this scenario, based on what you've told me, I'm likely to go ahead and have some of our residential life staff check in, or perhaps, this might be a good scenario where a dean from Student Support Services might reach out. And ideally, what we would be tracking towards is a conversation with a student that we're worried about, an open and honest conversation that either mom, dad, grandma, cousin has also phoned and said that they're worried about you. Can you tell us a little bit more about what's going on? Let's talk about options. Let's talk about a plan. Let's talk about various resources, what feels comfortable, what feels safe, what feels possible for you right now. And ideally, the last bit would be to close the loop and call back that concerned party together and say, we got it, right? We've got a plan. The one thing that I would add to all of this is that there are a number of possibilities based on what's going on, and so not everything is going to fit into one clear linear path, and that's okay. The other thing that I would encourage you to do, and stick this advice into your back pocket somewhere, is to remember when they were babies and maybe they were crying and it was like the sleep regression that we were all reading about, and then it was this, that, and the other, the growth wonder year, I don't know what it was. It was a fog, right? And I remember in that moment, myself as a parent getting this bit of advice that said, don't worry, it gets different. And that's exactly the type of thing that I think you may want to be prepared to say to your student at some point in this first semester. Don't worry, it'll get different. I can't guarantee it'll get better. I can't guarantee certainly that it'll get easier, but it won't always be this way, right? So if you're doing that on your end and know that there's this safety valve to call us and have us do things on our end, I think we're gonna be okay most times, right? And we have a brilliant set of resources and we all work together. I think the other thing I would say is it just starts somewhere, right? if it's after hours, Brenda mentioned the administrator on call system. There is always someone available to hear what you have to say and take in your concern, and we will work through a process on our end.
I want to use that, thank you, Dean Boyne. I want to use that as an opportunity just to underscore, because I think we've mentioned a couple of times the student's ID card, that on the back of their ID card, there are key numbers that we want to be sure every student has on them at all times, including public safety, administrator on call, health services, CAPS. Those numbers are always with them. I don't know that they spend a lot of time looking at the back of their ID card, but for you to know that, if you ever need to remind a student, I know you can call somebody right now, those numbers should be on their person at all times. I'll also say that having worked in first-year orientation for many, many years in my career, I always figure that students retain about 10% of what we say during orientation. So we don't try to go into the specifics of things because that's going to be lost on them. There's so much that they are processing and adapting to at this time, and that may be similar for you as well. So the takeaway we want everyone to have is that when you need something, we're here, and start anywhere, and that's okay. We don't expect students and we don't expect you to know like this is the place to always begin. Start anywhere and we'll get you in the right place, because we all work very, very closely with one another supporting students. So I have a question, Dr. Pallant, that's a little bit of I think a follow-on topically to what Dean Boyne was just talking about. And then I'm gonna circle us back to talk about when we do notify parents, when we're making that outreach. So Dr. Pallant, the question is about, does my student need to sign a health release form and file that with the health office? And in case of emergency or medical need, what does that look like? How are we managing that release?
Sure, and I was expecting that's on many people's minds. I have some people that are colleagues of mine who are sending their kids off to college, and I'm aware that there's all this information on the internet and even the New York Times that essentially says that when your kids go to college, those college officials want to rip them away from you and make sure they never talk to you ever again because you're done. Now, if you want that, that's your problem, but that's not our approach. I want to reinforce that it's not our goal to try to prevent communication between you and your child by any means. But there's a great deal of experience that we've all had and a great deal of information that backs up why confidentiality matters and how we use it. The example that I used the other day is, imagine that one of your kids might try alcohol, which they've never done before and will never do again, and comes to me with whatever malady, and we're frightened that if they told me that they had been drinking alcohol, that family or some other friend, professor might find out and didn't tell me, and I prescribed something that could be lethal if they had alcohol. I don't want to be there. The reason that we want to maintain confidentiality is that we want students to be able to tell us anything and everything. And we don't know which students may not. And I can give you, after 25 years here and 10 years, 35 years of practice, the frequency that I've had students that are pregnant that have never had sex, ever. You know, there's stuff that comes through that we need to be the open door. That's why we do it. It's not to say we don't want you talking to your parents. In that light, you don't need to give a blanket HIPAA form. You don't need to sign anything right now. We will always encourage your student, and you can encourage your student to give us permission to have a conversation. And I will get on the phone or Zoom with you and your child at the same time, because I'd like there to be a broad conversation. And God forbid, the greatest fear that people have is that if your kid ends up somehow in the hospital on a ventilator, unconscious, unable to talk, we won't tell you. We're gonna tell you, all right? I'd rather be sued, I can't believe I just said that. I'd rather not be sued.
I was gonna say, I was like, what are you talking about?
Did I make my point? I'd rather be criticized for sharing information when someone's in dire straits than have someone have great harm to come to them and never tell anybody. This concept of notifying next of kin in grave situations, we're going to do that. I don't want to carry that burden alone anyway. So please understand, it's a mandatory law across the country. There's a very, very potent one in Rhode Island about confidentiality. The purpose is so that we don't hurt people accidentally, not that we're trying to prevent, make them grow up without you the day they walk onto campus.
May I add?
Yes, please.
So I agree with, well, except for the Sue part, I agree with everything that Dr. Palin said. But the other thing that I also just want to put out there, because this often happens, so students will sign a release form so that we can talk to you, but unbeknownst to you, they will revoke it. And then you call me saying, I just spoke to you a day ago, and I'm like, I can't say anything. And then you get mad at me, and I'm like, I didn't do anything. Like, it's your student who decided that was it. That's all you can say. So I just want you to know that when they do sign a release form, it is not uncommon for them to say, you're done. Like, you're not going to talk to them anymore. And we won't do that, but they may not always communicate to you. So if we don't talk back to you, there may be an indication that we don't have an active release again. So I just want to put that out there.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I wonder, Dean Boyne, if I can ask you to talk a little bit, because working from a non-clinical space, how we think about connecting and working with emergency contacts, families, and student support networks generally.
So the laws that we're abiding by here as non-clinical administrative capacities, we're talking about FERPA, right, which is what protects a student's both academic record and privacy of record here as an enrolled student. FERPA allows for us to talk with you when there is an emergency and or a concern that rises to the level of emergency where that concern is articulable. In other words, as Dr. Pallant was saying, if your student is transported to the hospital and there are life-threatening injuries, you will hear from us. If your student is taken to the hospital and cannot call you themselves because there's something going on, you will hear from us. When you will not hear from us is when they're seeking services, right? Or even when they've gone to the hospital to seek treatment for a routine matter. Maybe they cut themselves on a can. Maybe they drank too much and they have to go to the hospital. You're not going to hear from us in those situations. You're likely going to get the bill, though. Okay. Which is what we say to students. You may want to let parents know because they're likely to get the bill, right? There are ways in which we're working on our end to empower students to inform you in order to make this system of support work for them, right? We know that for many of the students, you play a critical role in their sense of comfort, in their sense of having a sounding board, in their sense of getting advice and a place to seek love and care, right, when things are not going well. We want that for them, and we want to encourage them to keep you in the loop. We will call you when they can't, when it's rising to that level, but not likely before that level.
Thank you. Dr. Pallant, back to you. You're very popular today.
Love it,
So-
love it. Keep it going.
We have two questions here, very different questions, so stay with me. But the first one, does the Student Health Center provide gender-affirming care?
Yes, we do. We don't do gender-confirming surgery, but we will talk to anybody about gender-affirming care. We don't have them walk in and suddenly say, all right, bang. Usually it's a conversation, consent is done, options are reviewed, discussions about what may be reversible, what may not be reversible are done, conversations about the impact that it may have on you, your peers, your family. It's not you come in, it's a 5-minute visit, we give you a hormone. But we do gender affirming care for those who are adult in age have thought through this carefully, are competent to make that decision, and very much want to do so.
Thank you. Next questions. There are several questions about COVID protocols for the year. So maybe a combination of Dr. Pallant and Dean Ice can talk about COVID protocols.
No. No, all right. I'm messing. I guess what I can say is the COVID protocols are the same as they were last year, and they are mirrored across all of our Ivy Plus colleagues in all of the institutions in Rhode Island, which probably will leave some of you dissatisfied, but I'm going to speak Rhode Island for you. They are what they are. If we have a great deal of capacity instruction, follow-up, phone banks to answer any questions about COVID and to let us know when you may have COVID. If you do have COVID, we do follow the protocols from the CDC, which ask that you have 5 days of isolation, which will be in your dormitory or off-campus room, followed by 5 days of tight-fitting masks, so long as everything is slowly improving. A couple of thoughts that I hope will be reassuring is that I've been here throughout the COVID scenario. Roughly 2/3 of the campus has had COVID so far as I know. So at this point in time, at least 6,000 to 7,000 students on this campus have had COVID. And to my knowledge and to that of my peers in the Ivy League and Plus institution, no one who's been healthy in this age has had a severe health consequence that's ongoing with great morbidity. So yes, you're going to ask me questions about, I heard that, what about long COVID? There's a variety of scenarios. No one at Brown has been hospitalized with severe complications throughout my 3 years here, and I hope you can be reassured. When the vaccine comes out, we will follow whatever the national guidelines are and make it available if it's approved and recommended for people in this age group. And let me also put in a quick pitch, although you didn't ask for it. Please understand that Paxlovid, which is the common request that we get immediately from students and parents, don't diminish the duration or the symptoms that you have. It's not like strep throat, you take some penicillin or amoxicillin, you get better in 24 hours. Paxlovid is known to prevent likely hospitalizations. It diminishes risk for severe complications. It also raises the risk for something called rebound. So that if you take Paxlovid, it doesn't mean that you'll get better and 4 days later be smacked again, but the chances are higher. And what I don't do is if somebody really wants it, I don't say, I'm not giving it to you. But I do think that many a student has a slight misperception that I'll miss less class or I'll get better sooner if I get this Paxlovid medication, and that's not how this works. It's predominantly recommended for people who have high-risk conditions and are above a certain age.
So Dr. Pallant referenced what we did last year. You weren't here, so let me tell you what we do. We ask the students to isolate in their rooms, but we do not relocate anyone out of the space. And so those of you that are in shared spaces, your students are going to stay in that room with them. What we do then encourage, and it's part of the reason why we do this kind of welcoming and connections with others, based off of our recommendations from health guidance from Dr. Pallant and the CDC, they're okay to be in that shared space. If, however, they believe there's a comfort level that they just don't necessarily want to be in that shared space, the well student can go stay with a friend. And live in another location, not live in the lounge, not sleep on our couches, but if they would prefer for an overnight, a couple of days to stay with a friend who isn't sick, can be in that particular space. But we are not moving individuals in and out of spaces under our new COVID guidance and protocol. Our office has a 24/7 operation, our key center office, and we still distribute tests and masks to students. You must come and you get one. Not coming at a bucket or a box of them, but we do issue a test when students stop by our office, and we also issue at least 2 masks when they visit our space.
Thank you. I know that there are a few more questions that have been submitted. If you submitted a question that is specific to your student situation, I'm going to look and see if I can get a nod from my panelists. Will remain after, so if there were questions you submitted that we didn't get a chance to come to, please feel free to come and approach us after we conclude. I'll mention that we do have a number of tours that are departing from here at 11 o'clock, including a tour of Stern Lake Commons, which is our combined health center and residence hall. So that is one of the opportunities if you have some more questions that are about health services or want a chance to see that beautiful facility. We have a number of other tours as well. We have another panel, as I mentioned, from our colleagues as well as from the college this afternoon here under the tent at 3 o'clock. And again, we just want to underscore for you how many resources, staff, we are just a few. There are 19 offices in the Division of Campus Life. We have partners across campus who we work with in public safety, in financial aid, in dining services, our colleagues in academic advising in the college. So we really form a very strong network dedicated to your student success and working actively with one another whenever we see that there are students who could benefit from additional support. So thank you so much for bringing your students here to Brown and joining us this morning, and welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Hey folks, before you if you're leaving for the day, we'll just